Hi everyone, Lindsay Horvath, your mayor here. Wanted to welcome you to the WeHo Reads series. On behalf of all of my colleagues in the city of West Hollywood, it is our absolute pleasure to welcome you. This is part of our city's arts division's efforts to engage people in the creative arts and the literary arts. Your mayor here. We have so much fun programming, whether it's our city's poet laureate who brings such fantastic work to the city, whether it's the Little Free Library series or even Drag Queen Story Hour. We find so many ways to bring the literary arts to our community, to people of all ages in all different ways. I want to thank our staff for the work that they do to make this possible, and for anyone and everyone who is participating today and through the whole series. We hope that you enjoy today's programming and that you'll continue to engage with WeHo, the creative city. And thanks once again on behalf of the city of West Hollywood.
Oh, hi, my name is Mike Che. I'm the arts coordinator for the city of West Hollywood. Welcome to WeHo Reads. We're very pleased to present tonight's event. I also want to do a shout out for another event that is coming up from the city of West Hollywood's Arts Division. We have our One City, One Pride LGBTQ Arts Festival. It is 40 days of art, history, and culture. All the events and exhibitions are free to enjoy, and you can learn about them at weho.org/pride. And we have a very special live introduction from John Erickson, our council member.
Thank you so much, Mike. Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. My name is John Erickson. I'm a council member in the city of West Hollywood. Thank you to all of our amazing attendees, as well as all of our panelists today for such an amazing program. I am such a fan of all of these events, which is why I love to come. They're all on my calendar. This is such an important thing. I can't wait till we're all in person together and we're all here together once again. So stay safe, get vaccinated, and I want to turn it over to our illustrious panel tonight, and I hope you have an amazing show. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Jiaqing Wilson-Yang. I'm in Toronto right now, never been to LA. I'm going to open up this show with a song. Thanks so much for having me. Quite excited. I cut myself from plywood boards, traced it, but the lines were all wrong. What's my hang up with how I curve, nailed to what I think I deserve? Building starts early, foundations laid down, deep in remembering earlier. I lay down on the floor, cold on my skin, my clothes piled all around. What I have does not account for what I never got. Oh, the feeling, you're the first and the last. It's so hard to shake what you fought to grasp, and it got you out. And it got you out. My favorite tools aren't the best tools for this job. Digging in, uncovering, breaking down, and diving in, calling out, accepting some, hearing out, moving on. Thank you. Enjoy the panel.
Jiaqing Wilson-Yang, everyone. Get some snaps. Y'all want to turn on your mics and do some snaps for Jiaqing? Yes, she's snapping for herself. She ain't waiting for us.
I'll snap for myself.
All right.
What of it?
I love it. I love it too. All right. So thank you to Jiaqing for opening the show for us and for agreeing to join us from my homeland, our homeland, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where she's still in a very strict COVID quarantine, but says that she doesn't really mind. So, you know, doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal.
Try to stay
She can't
positive.
leave the house. Yeah, you can't leave the house yet, but you're like in Los Angeles, which is pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Cheap fare.
Because of the because of the internet. And she was like, "How'd you hear about me in WeHo?" And I said, "I have my ways." All right, so I'm Amanda Fletcher, and I am the WeHo Reads co-producer along with Dare Williams, who is backstage monitoring the chat. So please get active in there and say hi to everyone. We'll make sure that the panelists see your comments. All of our performers tonight are hyphenates. Jiaqing is a writer-musician who has not only released several albums, but her debut novel, Small Beauty, won a Lambda Literary Award for Transgender Fiction. Her writing can be found in Rice Paper Magazine, Maison Neuve. Did I say it with a good French accent? I took like 12 years of French and that's all I have. So sad. Carte Blanche, Room Magazine, ARC Poetry, and Poetry is Dead. Her music can be found at jiaqingwilsonyang.bandcamp.com. And when she's not working or making music, she works as a support worker for survivors of sexual violence. All right, so thanks to everyone for joining us. The mission of WeHo Reads this year is to amplify and uplift underrepresented writers and their stories, and to pay them for their time. I'm like so excited about this money aspect. I'm like, you get a check and you get a check and you get a check, because as you well know, some of you, I come from nonprofit, so I was always asking people to do things for free. So it's like real exciting to like make it rain with the dollar bills. All right. So as an expression of our mission, we must respect and uphold the historical and contemporary presence of Indigenous peoples throughout California, especially in the West Hollywood area. We acknowledge that we reside on the historic homeland of Indigenous peoples who were dispossessed of their land. We recognize the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tobangar, situated in the Los Angeles Basin. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tongva peoples. Tonight, WeHo Reads presents, we're considering alternative futures, like what if everyone saw themselves in young adult literature? How would that shift the cultural narrative? Who could we be? James Sie is the author of Still Life, Las Vegas, his debut novel, which was the Lambda Literary Award nominee for Best Gay Fiction. An award-winning playwright, he has had productions performed in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, at the Lincoln Center Institute, and across the country. He's contributed essays to The Rumpus and The Advocate. And in addition to writing, James is also a voiceover artist for many cartoons and games, including Jackie Chan Adventures, Kung Fu Panda, Legends of Awesomeness, Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's like the Roman numerals I had to count on my hand. and Avatar: The Last Airbender, where his excessive love of cabbages has earned him immortal fame. James now lives in Los Angeles with his darling husband, Doug, and son. You can visit his website at seaworld.com. Also, Gare can drop those links into the chat so everybody can follow you all. Skylar Kergil, is it Kergil? Is it a hard G, Skylar?
It's Kergil.
Kergil, thank you. I should have asked that before we started. Is a transgender activist, author, and musician whose debut memoir, Before I Had the Words, on being a transgender young adult, was published through Skyhorse Publishing in September 2017. He currently resides in Somerville, Massachusetts, while continuing advocacy for transgender students and adults nationwide. In 2014, he was the recipient of the Trevor Project's Youth Innovator Award for helping inspire LGBTQ youth towards wholeness. So we're all here to celebrate James' first YA novel, All Kinds of Other, which is a tender, nuanced, coming-of-age love story where two boys, one is cis and one who is trans, have been guarding their hearts until their feelings for each other give them a reason to stand up to their fears. So in a minute, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Skylar and James, and they'll be in conversation. They're going to do some readings. I'm really excited. I kind of have no idea what to expect, which makes it even more exciting. They'll be talking for about 45 minutes. And as your questions come up, please drop them in the chat because we'll break for a Q&A and get your questions answered. And then Jiaqing will play us out at the end of the event. So hopefully that sounds good. I keep wanting to make comments like I'm expecting people to answer me, like sound good, because I'm so used to like being in front of an audience. There's no audience here. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, Skylar and James.
Hey everybody. I'm so very excited about this just because there are so many people that I don't know, that I know, like Amanda, who I feel like such love from. And then there are these people that I'm getting to meet and getting to talk to that I never thought I would have gotten to. And Jiaqing and Skylar are two of them. The great thing about this event was I picked up Jiaqing's book, Little Beauty, and it is just amazing. So everybody get this one. My book is about two kids, two queer kids who are forming a connection, and one is cis and one is trans. And it's really funny that even though I could be Skylar's father, maybe grandfather, in terms of the book and the characters in it, he is like the pioneer. He is like somebody who you can't imagine that you would ever actually talk to because of his really kind of groundbreaking work doing vlogs on YouTube and his transition blogs. And without him, I don't think there would be a book because he started this whole flood of vlogging sites and it's such a vital component of the trans community, especially for kids who are just starting out. So, Skylar, I'm so happy to meet you. How do you feel about being the OG? Do you take that label on yourself, or does it make you uncomfortable? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I would say that I came out in 2006. So it has been about 15 years since I came out. And when I first published my YouTube video, well, I'll get into that a little bit later, but it wasn't to become a vlogger. It was just because I ran out of storage on my computer. So at the time, there were probably about 2 other trans masculine folks that I'd seen online. Actually, there were a lot more trans feminine folks or trans women who were vlogging, which was so cool to see back in 2009. I wouldn't say that I'm like the OG or that I caused or that I had this kind of wave happen after me, but I will say that a lot of the people that I've mentored, they call me the Tranpa. So I'm a bit, even though I turned 30 today, I'm a bit older than I was back then. So it's it's a joy, honestly. It's a really great community, and I love the trans YouTube community. It's fantastic.
Do you feel like it's a big responsibility? How do you, what is your relationship with it now?
Yeah, so with the YouTube community now, I've taken a few years off of vlogging. I had a lot of other things going on in my life that were more at the forefront than my transgender identity, because it's important to know that, being trans is only one part of the many facets of our identities in this life. And so I've taken a bit of a break from it, but I'm actually currently already scheming to come back. I've got a lot of content that I'd like to make. And I would say that when I felt like it was a burden, when I felt like it was stressful, that's when I took a step back, because I wanted to do this not only for myself and my younger self, but also to be authentic. And so it's important to set some healthy boundaries in order to be the person that you are on social media these days.
Mm-hmm. And, you've done so much with your music, with your art. And actually, the title of your book, which is Before I Had the Words, is such a perfect title for this panel, for this discussion, because we're talking about the importance of literature in for kids, especially for queer teens, queer kids who are trying to discover themselves and find themselves reflected. So maybe, and when you talk about Before I Had the Words, like through this book, it's a memoir, and it's so deeply intimate. Like, I have no idea how you remembered all of these things. I can't even remember what I had for breakfast, so I don't know. But anyway, throughout there's that thread of I didn't have the words. I didn't know what this meant. So can you maybe talk a little bit about what that was like for you? Like, what kind of representation did you see around when you were young?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, the first person I ever heard of was trans was one of my friends when I was like 14. I was in his punk band with him, and he linked me up with someone on MySpace, which was a long time ago, who was trans, and that was the first time I ever met or heard of somebody who had an experience like how I was feeling, and it was really truly a beautiful moment, but also really scary to be like, I'm not alone. But now, like, this whole world kind of opened up in front of me, where I felt like I could just be a girl for my mom or what I thought my parents wanted. And then I saw that there were people that were living my truth as well, and it was possible. And it was a bit overwhelming at times, to be quite honest. And I really took it as a sign that I needed to think through it. And I spent a lot of time just thinking and coming up with the ways to describe how I felt. And it definitely took a while, but had I been reading a young adult novel where there was a trans person in there, I might have realized the words sooner and been able to, articulate how I was feeling a bit more clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, for me, when I was growing up, which was long ago.
Not that long ago, James.
Yeah, I mean, pretty long ago. When I was growing up in New Jersey, I didn't know what being gay was. Like, there was no representation either in the media. There were no books, and certainly not in the library, for school. And so there was this hole inside of me because I didn't know what it was called. I had feelings, but I didn't have a way to express it or to see it reflected back to me. All I knew about what gay men were was that it had to do with sex, and it was these adults. There was no such thing as a gay teen because, they would be either tragic, right, or homicidal, right? So I don't know if you have ever seen the movie Fame, but that came out just as I was graduating from high school. And, you've got that really, really sad gay boy who what does he say? He says, never being happy isn't the same as being unhappy, is it? And that was the example. And I wish I had books that would have kind of given me some kind of roadmap or some kind of positive reinforcement, because as it was just something that was shameful or something you don't talk about, something that is hidden. And it wasn't until college that I met a group of people, a community of gay men, and then it was joyous. It was great after that. It was just, through my high school years, it was just kind of, nothing. I don't know is Jiaqing here? Because I was just wondering, I don't know where you fit in the, generations of things. And I was just wondering, what was your growing up like, and what kind of representation did you see?
So growing up for me, there wasn't a lot of representation of queer or trans people, certainly not any representation of like East Asian queer or trans folks. Host has asked me to start my video. Okay.
There you are.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of representation at all in the young adult books. I think, there just weren't things to read. So the things that I would read were usually very based in escapism. So I grew up in a small town outside of Hamilton, which is a city nearby Toronto. And our public library didn't have a lot. So I just read the fantasy section through and through, not really finding representation, but finding escape and imagination and, play and possibility. But almost never, actually, no, never. I can say unequivocally never did I run into a representation of trans women or certainly not of East Asian trans women at all.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you find in some ways that, like, I found this because I was a huge reader, and I know, Skylar, you were a big reader too, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain magpie effect of like trying to find the little pieces that seem to reflect you, even though, oh, look, there's a really sensitive boy, and you would take that. It was such small, shiny objects that you could peck and grab, but you never saw yourself completely reflected. Is that your experience, like in fantasy and things like that?
Definitely my experience, and I think, it's unfortunate, and I wish that I had roadmaps and things like that. But I do think that you learn a lot when you're always reading for subtext, right? You're always looking for those hints, right? Nothing's ever stated, and you're like, oh, I think this is really queer, or oh, I think, so that I love what you just said about a magpie effect, like where you're sort of cobbling together these things and you're forced into a different kind of creativity. I do think it's better that we have roadmaps, though. To be clear, I don't want to romanticize this like desert of queerness and stuff, but yeah.
Right, because it feels like crumbs, little crumbs that you can eat and sustain yourself, but it's not a meal.
No.
That's actually really funny that Jiaqing brought up the fantasy genre, because I distinctly remember as a kid going into the bookstore, which bless the bookstores, and sitting down in the fantasy aisle and reading the next Animorphs book, because my parents would get me them, and they were like when these animals turn into people and people into animals, and it was like this really like weird but also really great series. And I just remember being like, well, if someone can identify as like whatever and they can become that in fantasy, like what's to stop that in like real life? Like obviously I didn't transition to become an animal. I transitioned from female to masculine. But it was really like, it was like those little things where it was like, oh wow, like this transformation, and it's super like, like fanatical, like definitely not gonna happen in real life, but it was so affirming in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
in a good way.
Well, since we're in your childhood, do you want to read a little bit from your?
Yeah, I would.
What? Oh, and before I had the words, it's coming out in paperback. Did you say?
It is coming back out in paperback. If I had just emailed my editor back, I would be able to tell you when. But pretty soon in paperback with a new foreword by one of my good friends. His name is also Skylar. He was the first trans swimmer on the Harvard men's team. He's a wonderful person. And so I'm really excited about that. Yeah. But yeah, the selection I'd love to start out with. Before I do, I always give a little bit of a disclaimer. And that is that because my book is a memoir and because it is nonfiction, I do open up about a lot of things in my memoir. For example, the name I was given at birth, the surgeries I've had, intimate relationships I've had, a lot of the troubles that I had with my family. Certain things that I do say and I have said on my YouTube channel, but it's very, very personal. And I just want to give a disclaimer that I chose for myself to, I guess, come out repeatedly and repeatedly over and over again and to share my story because that's what I needed when I was younger. That's the whole reason I wrote this book. I was a big reader, like James said. And I just want to make sure that it's disclosed that my choice to share any information about my past, like sharing my birth name, sharing my surgeries, whatnot, and my choices is completely my choice. And by no means is this an invitation to ask any other trans or even LGBT person any of the questions that I ultimately do disclose answers to. So I just want to make that very clear. I do that every time before I read. So this chapter of my book is called "You Can Call Me Mike," and I quote it as my first coming out experience. So, "And what's your name, little one?" a stranger asked, putting his hand down on my shoulder. "You can call me Mike," I exclaimed as I turned around to face the man. "Well, hello then, Mike." He had gray whiskers and a friendly smile. I smiled back up at him, my brown eyes barely showing underneath my new bowl cut hairstyle. Hey, it was the early 90s. Wearing my bright yellow sundress, I followed my grandpa to the hardware store. It was April of 1996. I was almost 4 years old, and up until that point, I had been called Catherine Elizabeth. Never Mike, always Catherine. When I came to this conclusion, announcing my identity in front of close family and friends, my grandpa and parents were taken aback, but in a swift motion, all was laid to rest. "Mike it is," my grandpa chimed in. My parents didn't look worried. The moment passed in all of 3 seconds. Except, for the rest of the summer, I would only respond to the name Mike. While I wish I could say I knew I was transgender at 4 years old, I didn't. I suppose I expressed myself however I saw fit at the time, and my parents let me. If I had not come out as transgender later in life, this early memory would likely be recounted as a fun childhood exploration, a silly couple of months for me when I was younger. But because that is not the case, I look back on it as my first coming out experience, one that would likely garner a different reaction from my parents in today's world. Born on May 19th, 1991, I am a Taurus. I am stubborn. I made sure every person called me Mike that entire summer. It ended when I went back to kindergarten and the teacher read my legal name off the roster. At recess, we lined up by 2 sandboxes, boys on one side, girls on the other. There was actually a sandbox in the middle, and according to my mom, I often invited kids to that sandbox. While I could enjoy my weird friends in my weird sandbox, I couldn't quite demand that the teachers called me Mike. I was too shy for that. By default, I went back to being called my birth name. That's what the government documents said, and that's what I had been told many, many times. I was a girl named Catherine. I was told I belonged in that sandbox, the one for girls. I didn't know anything else.
You know, the thing that permeates through your book is your mom is just so great, you know, and I mean, you would have had a much different experience, right? Had she not been as open to just letting you be who you were.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that while my mom was like, she eventually became my best friend, my biggest advocate, a mama to a bunch of other trans folks. At first, she was like, you know what, like, you can go to therapy and stuff, but I'm not going to pay for hormones or doctor's appointments or anything like that. She was like very concerned because I was 15, 16 years old at the time. And I guess like after I got my first binder, which compressed my chest, she saw I was happier. And then after I started on hormones, which was right before I went off to college, like it was like 4 months on hormones, and she was like, Sky, I can just see you glowing and you're so happy. Like, let's get you top surgery before college. And I was like, Mom, I'm going to college in like 3 months. It's not going to happen. But it took her a while to see that, you know, being trans wasn't a bad thing. It was actually something that freed me. And I became more of my outgoing, excited, hyper self again since puberty. So she was very supportive. It took a couple months for sure.
And probably if there had been more literature or, you know, just representation, she could have been more versed. Right?
Absolutely. In fact, the first book she ever got that she thought was supposed to be helpful for parents of trans teens was telling parents that I've seen the book, and I think she burned it or got rid of it after she read it. She was like, this entire book is just telling me how to make you not trans. I don't understand how this is a supportive book. And I remember it being on our bookshelf. And one day I opened it up, I flipped to a random page, and I was just like, oh gosh, this is just very negative. So thankfully she didn't listen to that book, but someone had recommended it to her, and I don't know who. And I was like, yeah, that book, not good. But again, it's like 2005. There really wasn't much out there.
Yeah. I mean, what's great now is I think there's a lot of literature. Well, I mean, not a lot, but there's a lot more literature about as like fiction for YA, you know, the young adults, that is that centers the trans or non-binary experience. It was funny when I started writing, there wasn't anything really. There was mostly memoir. A little bit of fiction that featured trans feminine characters, and I don't think I couldn't find anything that had a trans masculine character in it. This was like 2016.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right, because when you and I were talking previously, most of the young adult trans books that I've read are nonfiction. They're memoirs, like my friend Erin Andrews' book, my friend Katie Hill's book. They both came out as young adult nonfiction books, which were probably in the past 5 or 6 years. But yeah, it's I didn't really see much either, and that's why I was really excited when I read your novel, because it does a great job not just encapsulating the different nuances of the trans experience, but also the interpersonal relationships that one has going on while also discovering their identity and while also becoming confident in their identity, and how those relationships both can sometimes hinder, but also help the confidence of a trans youth. Yeah,
absolutely.
Was there, I wanted to ask you, when you were writing this book, did you have any sort of like resources or people that inspired you, helped you with the storyline, that helped give you more insight about the uniqueness of every trans experience? And if so, who are those?
So it started out, the book, kind of the genesis of it was a friend of mine from Chicago was coming to Los Angeles to see if he can make it as an actor for 6 months in Hollywood. And he wanted to, he stayed with us for a few days, and he brought along his son. And his son had pretty recently transitioned as a transmasculine person. And he was going to go to school for a semester and just see what it was like to just be a boy, and just feel like what that experience was, because he had grown up with everyone around him knowing him previously. And so, there was a certain tension there. And that was really fascinating to me. And I know that my teen self would never, I was just fascinated that he was so chill about it. He was so confident in who he was. And I know that my teen self had absolutely no chill and no confidence at all about who I was. And then, so, it started this idea of these two people with very different temperaments, finding a connection together is what started it. So what I did was, as a gay man in the beginning, I thought, oh, yeah, I know I know what this experience is like. I mean, LGBTQ, it's all kind of the same, isn't it? We're all, we all have the same experience. And just by doing interviews, talking to kids, so first the boy, my friend's son, interviewed him, talked to some kids at the Pittsburgh Equality Center, found another kid to interview, and I realized just how little I knew, and that made me feel a little bit, I don't know, there was a certain, I realized that I was a rather passive person when it came to trans issues. And I felt really, kind of, there's a lot of shame in that, because I had just assumed that everything was kind of the same, and it's not. There are so many different challenges all along the LGBTQ spectrum, right? And things that were good for one part of one letter didn't necessarily translate or trickle down to the other letters. So I think for me, it was just listening, Oh, and also watching your videos, watching Alex Birdie's videos. Those, they helped me so much in just kind of understanding what the process was and what the great difficulties were. And then on Tumblr, there were so many Tumblr blogs. Like there's one called Transgender Teen Survival Guide, where kids were able to ask questions. And, just watching the questions, and sometimes they were the same. There was some commonality. But then depending on where they lived, it was so different, So when you were talking about how not every trans experience is the same, that, there's a multiplicity of experiences, that those kind of sites really helped me. But it was mostly talking with the kids and kind of just listening and hoping that I could reflect back what they experienced. So that was kind of my way in.
I think personally, reading all kinds of other was a breath of fresh air for me, because I would love to, and actually I already plan on doing it, but donating a couple copies to my high school and middle school libraries, because I think that's so important for accessibility. And it just, not only did you highlight a trans experience, it was many identities and many of the convoluted and sometimes beautiful and sometimes heartbreaking aspects of being not only LGBT or LGB, but also trans as well. With that being said, would you like to read a segment from your novel?
Oh, good segue. Yeah.
I tried. I tried so hard.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to read a section from, it alternates in viewpoints, in perspectives. There's Jules, the cisgender teen, and then there's Jack, who is the transgender teen. And so I'm going to read a section from Jules, who has kind of recently discovered that he was gay and is kind of figuring out what kind of person he is. And this is his first time that he is meeting Jack. Sometimes I wonder if I would feel so behind the gay curve. Is that a thing? If I had admitted I was gay before the end of freshman year. But it's not like I knew and was hiding the fact. I mean, it really didn't come up until then. Sure, there were signs, but I didn't know they were supposed to add up to anything. Like when all the hunky guys on that CW show tear off their shirts and become werewolves, I thought everyone got that same breathless, scared, excited feeling I did watching them transform. And I've liked girls before, just, I guess, not the way I'm supposed to. Was I lying to myself? Maybe. But it was more like there was this blank spot in the middle of myself that I didn't know was supposed to be filled until I did. Okay, there was this time in 5th grade when I got my first laptop, and I Googled men doing sex. Just curious, I told myself. Big mistake. The first results were already too much. Exciting for a moment, but then the windows kept popping up and it became full tilt terrifying. Sweaty, naked men appeared on my screen faster than I could click them away. What they were doing looked frantic and frightening and painful. Videos, images, GIFs. It was like that scene from the Disney movie with the walking brooms. The more I clicked away, the more windows kept sprouting up. I didn't know what to do. I had to show the laptop to my mother. It was not a happy thing. The gay men on billboards for AIDS awareness, or condom use, or the ones on TV shows, they don't look a whole lot different from those guys on the porn sites. Ripply muscles and gleaming smiles, hairless white skin. Is that what we're all supposed to turn into, sooner or later? Hunky werewolves, except backward, transforming from gawky, awkward beasts into buff gay men with smooth skin and muscles? I am wholly unprepared to deal with that level of gay. And yet, here I am, end of 5th period, standing in front of Mr. Jansen's classroom, the one with the rainbow sticker on the window. A clipboard is tucked into a smoke-colored plastic file holder attached to the door. GSA Club, room 554. We welcome all LGBTQ students and their straight allies. Sign up below. There are 15 students already signed up. I wonder how many of them are gay and how many are straight. Would we wear color-coded name tags? Lots of spaces left. There's a pen dangling from the clipboard on a string. Just do it already. I grab the pen, uncap it, put the cap back on, put back the clipboard, pick up the clipboard, grab the pen. You should just go for it. I whirl around. Behind me, it's the guy. One Direction. Zayn, not Zayn. Him. I startle so badly, I hurl the clipboard. It misses him by inches and drops to the ground, the smacking sound like a gunshot echoing down the hall. What? I say. I try to shake the panic out of my voice. Yeah. He bends down and swipes up the clipboard by his feet, holds it out to me. The GSA. It can be a good way to meet people, you know, with similar interests. Standing face to face, he barely comes up to my shoulder, and a good 3 inches of him is on top of his head. This cascade of thick, dark hair, plus the swoosh, free from cap or hoodie. He holds out the clipboard, waves it. Yeah, right, I say, grabbing it. Sure. Mr. Jansen seems pretty cool, he says. I have him for physics. Oh, good, I say, nodding way too many times. I pretend to study the clipboard. Yeah, sounds interesting. Thanks. It could be a bust, you never know. Depends on the school, but it never hurts to scope out the territory, you know? He ducks behind me to deposit a paper in Mr. Jansen's file holder, and then he's walking away. We kind of met at Dylan's, I say, and he stops. Yeah, he says. Kinda. I'm Jules, I say, and do something so bizarre, it amazes even myself. I stick out my hand. It's like I'm trying to act more adult than I'm feeling, trying to do the grown-up thing, but it just comes across as formal and weird. He looks at my hand, considers it, then reaches for his own. Jack. His hand is small, but he squeezes mine so firmly and shakes it so hard I almost buckle. 2 shakes, that's it, but my hand tingles when he releases it. Youch! Jack, I say. And then he grins, like that was just the sound he wanted to hear. And that grin, it's it. His grin is like a match that lights a candle. And these deep dimples appear out of nowhere and punctuate the glow. His eyes, those hard discs of brown, melt into something warm and happy. It's impossible not to grin back. So, I guess we're the new kids, right? I say. Oh yeah, Jack says. We're the new ones. 1 second more of that smile, and then it's gone. I guess I'll see ya, he says, and disappears into the shadow of the stairs. My heart is pumping so hard. Why? You know how when you see a person, like a person walking down the street, and you immediately know you like them? I don't know what it is. Maybe they remind you of someone who was nice to you as a baby. Or maybe it's all chemical, like a smell or an aura. Or is it recognition? Like you know right off there was something in them that was like something in you? Whatever it was there, that feeling, in the handshake, in the smile. There when I finally met him. Jack. There we go. Thank you. I want to get to your whole origin story. Just because there's a difference between fiction, nonfiction, you know, and I think each of them contributes something to a kid's understanding of themselves. I mean, like, what do you feel like is the difference between reading something that's like a memoir and reading something that's like, that is fiction?
Yeah, I think fiction is great like that as an example, because it opens up discourse where now you've got a novel, they've got fiction characters in it, and you can have a conversation with somebody being like, so how do you think like Jack felt? How did you think Jules felt like during these interactions? Whereas, you know, with my memoir, it's pretty clear how I feel because I disclosed that. So I think that like that's a big part of why I loved reading fiction growing up, was like I could look at the characters, but I didn't have to worry about offending a real person by asking questions or diving deeper into it. Whereas someone could be like, oh, if you saw like Skylar, you know, he had to get a hysterectomy or he chose to be stealth, that didn't go so well for him. So why are you choosing this, right? But like that's putting me on under the bus, kind of being like, it didn't go well for him, so like explain how it's going to go well for you, versus being like, how do you think this person felt? And I think that it's an important distinction to have between fiction and nonfiction, is that nonfiction, when you're diving into it, you're really diving into someone's real lived story, versus with fiction, there are certain holes and certain storylines that are left not like ended completely, and that gives you talking points, and that gives you this environment to have these conversations.
Oh. And also I think like in the responses to the book, the reader really gloms onto the characters, right? And identifies with the character or not. But for you, you are the person. Right? And in a way, they feel like they know you. Is that a weird experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely is weird. I definitely choose what I do and what I don't share. It really came down to both protecting my own self and then also a lot of times protecting the identities of the people that are involved in my life. Because there are certain things that other people around me went through that impacted my transition, but those weren't my stories to tell. Whereas if it's fiction, you can kind of maybe dive into that. But for me personally, I definitely could not go to certain degrees with that information out of confidentiality. But I think it's,
and I noticed that you did change like names of people, right?
Yeah, I'd say I changed probably 3/4 of the names of people in my book. Certain people, I asked for their permission to keep their names simply because on my YouTube channel, let's say I introduced my best friend Amy on my YouTube channel, they would totally know who she was as a pseudonym in my book. So like, why not just keep her Amy, you know? But I asked permission for that and I was granted permission to do that, so.
So wait, before you do another reading, I just want to know, really.
Yeah.
Is it, how do you have such a clear memory? I know you write journals. Was it based on that or do you just have a really good memory that way?
So no, I would say that I actually have a really bad memory, but that's why since I could write, I was writing journals. Like back in the sparkly gel pens days, talking about my first boyfriend, Bob, whatever. But like I wrote journals almost every single day. My parents were also divorced. So I would write letters to my dad when I couldn't talk to him on the phone. So pretty much like half of everything that's in my book is directly taken from my journals. There was also my online journals, like my Tumblr account, as well as my live journal account. That actually came in super handy for me to know exactly when I figured out the words about my transition, because I was writing on live journal at the time. So yeah, it was a lot of note taking starting from like when I was like 8 years old, and then a lot of stories that my parents told me that I vaguely remembered that kind of jogged my memory.
I mean, good on you, because there's such an immediacy in your book, like in the writing. It feels so present at the time that you were experiencing it. I mean, it's very sensory in that way. So perhaps
Definitely.
give us a little clip.
You want a little clip? All right. I will. I'm going to read to you on the day I started testosterone, which was January 21st, 2009. And I think I probably won't go, I'll do a little bit of a snippet of why I ended up on YouTube, just as like a extra post this, but I think this is most important. So on January 21st of 2009, I went to the endocrinologist. On the drive home, after my first shot of testosterone, my mom let me know I could stay home from school for the rest of the day since I had already taken it off. But we were home by 11 in the morning and I was energized. I packed my bag to head to school. She looked at me with wide eyes like, what kid wants to go back to school when they could have the day off? But agreed that that was fine. It was my choice. So after I got home, I ran up to my bedroom to store the testosterone vial and syringes in a safe spot. I flipped open my MacBook and hit the record button on the built-in app that came with my computer. The webcam wasn't the best quality, but this was the only device besides my digital camera that I could record on. Plus, I didn't really care about seeing my face nearly as much as I cared about my voice. I wanted to make sure I knew what my voice sounded like pre-testosterone so that I could compare. I looked into the camera and spoke. I hadn't planned anything. Hi. Okay, so this is my first video where I'm actually talking. Yeah, so it's January 21st. It's like noon. And this morning I went to the endocrinologist in Boston, Dr. Spack. He was late and mom was all frustrated, but he wrote my prescription for testosterone in like 2 hours. And so my mom was all like, whoa, I didn't know this was happening so fast. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know this was happening so fast. But so she was all like, yeah, so I want to see how he does the shot because I want you doing it by yourself. And I was like, okay, whatever, as long as I get to shoot up myself with man today. I talked through the process for another minute, then slammed my laptop shut and downstairs to head off to school. I couldn't wait to tell all my friends about my morning. And so in the weeks following that, and I'll just summarize the next chapter, but in the weeks following that, I wanted to record my voice on my computer. And about 3 weeks into me recording, I pressed record one day and my computer said, there's not enough memory to record. And I was like, this is unacceptable because I've been recording my voice like in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, after working out, after drinking coffee, whatever. I was like, let's see how this voice drop. And so this was 2009, back when teachers would give you a little handout, a piece of paper that would tell you how to put your project video onto YouTube, how to make it public, and then have the link so you could bring that into class and we could show it in class. So I knew that at that point, I was like, oh, you can put videos on YouTube and you can just download them later. Since I was a broke, 17-year-old, I was like, okay, like I'll get a hard drive someday. I'll just put them on the YouTube and not even worry about it, which is why most of my beginning videos are just like January 2nd, but it's like, or January 21st, but it's uploaded in the end of February. And so it's like, I just stored them on there and then people started finding them. And then I started finding more people. And then I began to find more trans people. Like Tyler Oakley was like the only LGBT person I followed at the time. And I just started finding these trans people from all around the world. And so it was just incredible because like, unlike on MySpace or on Tumblr, like these people were also making videos, and it just felt like I had a community finally. And so at one point there was a transition of me just speaking for myself, like a journalistic kind of style, to me then kind of going a bit into more detail, which was super helpful for writing my book, because I knew that other people were listening, and like maybe there are certain effects of testosterone or things I'd been through that I disclosed more of because I thought it might help them, versus I probably wouldn't have even written that in my journal. So that's how I ended up on YouTube for many, many years.
Thank God you were broke. That's all I can say. Thank God.
I was working at Kmart at the time for I think like $5 an hour. So yeah, I couldn't afford a hard drive.
Okay, I want to ask you. So now you've written a memoir, right? What do you
Yes.
think people get from the memoir that they didn't get from all of your videos? Do you know what I mean? Like what is it in a book, in writing, that is so different?
So that's actually a big reason why I wrote my memoir, because I always wanted to write a book. YouTube was kind of a happy accident that I ended up doing for a long period of time, which I'm really glad I did, because it also helped me remember things. It's really easy for me to look back on things and kind of like put my optimistic lens on them and not fully go into the fact that like it was really hard that my dad didn't understand what being trans was for many years. Eventually he did understand it, and now he like is super accepting, but like I could easily just say, oh, my dad always loved me, like he always understood it, no problem. That was super important. But I think like when it comes to like nonfiction, it was more therapeutic for me to write the book for my younger self than I think it was for me to be like, I really want to publish this book and spread it worldwide. It was just something I always wanted to do. And like, I knew that my younger self would have picked up a book like this. That's why I made like the front like really fun. It's one of my paintings and one of my friends who drew me. And I wanted to make it like super cute and aesthetically pleasing, so someone would just pick it off the shelf because of the way it looked. But I think that like, I also struggle with the fact that there are certain things that I couldn't say in a nonfiction memoir because they would have negatively impacted other people other than myself. And so that's sort of why I'm currently working on like a series of short stories. Some are fiction, some are nonfiction, but just putting them together as one. So it's up to you to kind of figure out what's true and what's not. However, I also think that nonfiction is super crucial and important, like I said before, because it gives characters, it gives insights that people can dissect without it actually being an attack on a real living trans person or being pursued as an attack.
That's true. And I also think that like with memoir, instead of the YouTube, say they can be immersed in this book. They don't have to wait for the next video. It's like a bigger gulp in a way. And
actually, sorry, I got distracted. That was what I meant to say, was that it was like my memoir doesn't go in chronological order 100%. Right. It goes back and forth, like some memories and then some big milestones. My YouTube channel is the epitome of hyperactive child on literal steroids. All over the place. Like I was in college, I was in high school, I was doing so many things. So like I would say something maybe let's say in 2009 and then revisit it again in like 2011. And like, it was all the same story. So it's just like, yeah, YouTube channel was like, just like what you see with vlogging, like people that are just like rambling on and on and on. And I would repeat myself or I would miss details. And so for me personally, like I love watching YouTube. I watch so much, basically true crime, but also I watch a bunch of other trans YouTubers to support them. However, I think that like having my memoir like in almost chronological order makes more sense than watching all like 370 videos that I have. Well, it's like you could watch them all, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like the YouTubes are the raw material and the book is more refined, right?
Yes, it's edited for sure. Like I worked with an editor and I learned so much doing that. But yeah, it's it's like the book is like think about it this way. You go on a vacation, right? And you get your first digital camera. Like I remember my best friend Amy did this all the time. She got her first digital camera and took thousands of pictures, like for every single event. Like, I mean, hundreds, but like, yeah, for every single event, you got all these pictures and like maybe like a third of them are good and people actually would want to see. And so you got to like pare them down. And so it's kind of like that. It's like with YouTube, you can capture thousands of pictures, thousands of hours, lots of this raw content. But when push comes to shove, it's important to, you know, have something a bit more palatable, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's like, you know, that's not to say that all the in-betweens and the nuances and the other interests that people have, like as trans people, because like my editor made me get rid of a bunch of chapters that I had written because it just wasn't related to me being trans. It was just things that happened in my life that I wanted to share, but like it really didn't follow the whole like, you know, coming out and my journey storyline. So I had to get rid of them. And that's sort of, that was hard for me because I was like, oh, but these are like really good memories that I have of fun things that I did, like breaking into an abandoned building and almost getting arrested. And they're like, that has nothing to do with you being trans, Sky. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. I can delete that. So yeah, it's super interesting. But yeah, I wanted to ask you as well, James, that I know growing up, you didn't really have a lot of representation as a gay man in your teens. And so, you know, if you could say something to your younger self, the person who didn't know that you would become, you know, an author, a voice actor, love Kung Fu Panda, by the way. Cool. But yes. But if, you know, if there was something that you could tell your younger self that would encourage them to kind of embark on the path that you finally embarked on, what do you think you would want to say to them? And I'd love to also hear if Jiaqing wants to say that as well for herself.
Yeah. I guess for me, I would say that it's okay who you are, and be a little more assertive. Be a little more okay with who you are, because I don't know. I mean, I was so busy hiding myself from myself that I didn't really live in the moment. And so I guess I would tell myself to live in the moment, explore what it means to be who you are, and you know, maybe kiss a guy. I don't know, just do it, you know, and that it was going to be okay. That you will be married, that you will have a wonderful son, and you will have a wonderful life. And a lot of it is because you are who you are, and part of that is being queer. And yeah, so that's kind of what I would say to myself. How about you, Jiaqing?
Hi, I love that answer. Something that I would say to my younger self. That's what we're at, eh? I guess I would probably, this might sound a little harsh, but I think I would tell my younger self, this is going to hurt like hell. This is really going to hurt. And you're going to get through it. And you're going to see beauty that you didn't expect was possible. And that's going to balance out how much it's going to hurt. And you're going to find people. That's what I would tell myself.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's beautiful. I feel the same way,
Yeah.
That's good. I think we should all just take a few breaths, right? Wonderful.
Way to get deep, Skylar, in the end. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's like, I'm not crying, you're crying.
Damn.
I try to ask everybody that at some point in their lives, but I figured now is a better time than ever. So y'all are beautiful people.
Amazing. Okay, so thank you so much to all three of you for taking your time and your emotional and psychic and physical energy from all these time zones and all these different experiences to come and, you know, talk online, you know, in front of who knows who. I guess, Skylar, you're pretty used to it with the YouTube channel. This is old hat for you. We should have had you help us with the tech. So we
Oh,
do
wait.
have a couple questions. Oh,
Oh,
what?
you do. Go ahead. No, keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Questions,
Yeah.
questions. Okay, so the first one actually comes from Dare, and it's a question about representation, because we do keep talking about how important representation is and that representation matters. And I think the question that Dare was asking was, what about the authenticity of representation, especially in the media? Like, do you feel that representation is in fact liberation? And can you speak to that?
I mean, I'm happy to speak to that. I do believe that representation in the media is totally clutch. Media is something that we consume across various platforms. It's how people stay engaged with social causes, with certain concerns. And so as an example, I just started watching some random show. I don't remember the name of it. No, I think it, no, crap. I don't remember the name of it. I apologize. But there is a Black trans masculine person who plays a Black trans man in the show. And I had no idea. I had never heard of him, had never seen him on social media or anything like that. And his storyline, like he at one point says like, oh yeah, like it's really easy to date as a Black trans man. And I like immediately, I was like Googling the name. And I was like, is he actually like, I was like, is he a Black trans man? And he is. And that was just like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You know, I just got so excited that I was like a trans person playing a trans person and just being like, it was super nonchalant. It wasn't the main storyline. It was just like, this is who I am. And I feel like that kind of, if that had been happening when I was watching like, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy back in 2000s or like, you know, any show like that, if there had been a trans character, I would have been like, whoa, like that's new words. And so I think it's super important in media. And I think especially in literature, because I'm a big reader, I haven't really seen much besides like James's book and a couple other books that I know are written by trans folks. But like when it comes down to it, like every story is super important, I believe, for representation.
And I feel like every time there is something like that, it's a hit in somebody's brain who is not of that experience. And with every hit in their brain, it normalizes things so that the other experience is not some strange, it's not a strange person out there, but it's just another person. It's just another shade of life. And I mean, okay, this is like a little side thing, but like when Will and Grace came out, right? It was this little moment of, oh, they're funny, they're gay, it's okay, it's all right. Look, they're just people too. And then with each of those gay characters, it became much more normalized so that it wasn't so scary. And I think that's really important. And that's why for kids to be able to read books and for adults to read those same books will make it a known thing, more of a known thing, and it will calm the shit out of people.
Right.
You know.
Jiaqing, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think like representation is key. It's so important. I think visibility is so important. But I think the representation that I really want to see more of is of, you know, trans folks just doing things in their life. Like, I think talking about transition and that is a huge aspect of all of our lives. And it's really important that it's documented and shared. But I think like, as we're working to like inclusion or whatever words we want to use, maybe just not violence in our lives, I think the understanding that, you know, we are more than our transition narratives. There is more to our lives, you know, like we break into buildings late at night, like every other youth. Well, maybe not every other youth, but like lots of men, lots of youth. I just think that that's so important. I have my friend Morgan Page often talks about, we're going to be at a good point when we can have trans villains that aren't super offensive, right? When we can have a villain and not be like, oh, this is all trans people, like all trans women are Buffalo Bill kind of thing, in Silence of the Lambs. So I really think, representation is super important. But there's something in that the mundanity of our lives, I don't know if that's a word, that is also really important. And I think in some ways more liberatory than talking about, what surgeries we've had and how painful they were. They're important, but they're not our whole selves, right?
Right.
Just want to throw in, there's a great documentary called Disclosure. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's on Netflix.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. It's really amazing. You should take it because it shows, representations in the media of trans people and how it's mind blowing because you don't realize the tropes that get in through culture and it's really eye opening. So I'd recommend that. Yeah.
I think that was the documentary, I think, where they talked about like how basically it was in media and movies where a man who's cross-dressing is like comedy, like that's where it came from. And it was like something that I'd never really thought about where a man dressed as a woman is like the butt of jokes. And that has been, that has been forever in Hollywood. And I just feel like the messages that we receive that we aren't even aware of are so prevalent. That I really think that
like Mrs. Doubtfire, for an example.
Yeah, I think it does actually talk about Mrs. Doubtfire. Yeah. Okay, so we have actually one question from the audience. Patrick Hutchings wants to tell you, thank you all for your honesty and authenticity. You have helped empower me with a vocabulary of healing and humor for future conversations with LGBTQ friends and family. So not a question, but a lovely comment.
Very lovely.
So jumping off that lovely comment, I would like to know what is one thing from each of you that we can do, that like an action item that we can do to support transgender youth, and like what is a way that we can, something that we can actually do that goes beyond like sharing a link on social media?
I mean, personally, I would say that even though a lot of the advertising of this is coming from social media, just simply because of our population, is that there I think are over 100 bills right now restricting trans youth in schools, sports, access to healthcare. And it's easy enough to share that information on social media, but what I do is I try and share it where there's a phone number that you can call and an email that you can send. And in the past couple of months, I've seen several of these bills completely knocked down. Just people don't support them anymore.
Right.
And that's not just because that legislator just was like looking at it and was like, okay, like we're just not going to do this. Why bother? It's because people are calling and emailing, and we got to be the squeakiest of wheels, especially allies, because there's so many trans people, but that's the best way to do is look up what those bills are, check them out and make a phone call, make an email. It takes 30 seconds. Bada bing, bada boom. And that's way better than just, liking something on Facebook, in my opinion.
Right. Great. Thank you.
I guess for me, I mean, exactly what Skylar said. And for me, what's been really helpful as an ally is to volunteer. So I volunteer a lot at the LGBT Center in Los Angeles. It puts you in a community in which you are interacting on a weekly basis with people who are outside of your own experience. And it just, it helps you feel like you're contributing to helping a community. And at the same time, you are becoming more immersed in the community. And it feels very empowering to be able to help, to be a little cog in this community. So for me, that's been very helpful.
Right. That's great. Thank you.
Um,
Jiaqing, what do you got for us?
What do I got? What do I got? I would say looking for places that are run by, like, groups that are run by trans folks, seeing what trans folks in the areas you're living in are organizing around, whether it's a bill like Skylar mentioned, or whether it's programming at a community center. I think looking into that and then supporting those initiatives that are coming from trans people in the areas you live. I know where I'm at in Toronto, there's a lot of calls for support for an organization called Maggie's, which supports sex workers here in the city.
Right.
And they do great work. And, you know, for better or for worse, often both, a lot of us do sex work. So I think,
Right.
you know, supporting the places that support us to do the work we have to do, and in some cases really want to do, I think that's super important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And also, I would say my amazing segue is going to be to read stories written by, for, about trans folks. So yeah, I'm going to segue back into buy your books. You know, Book Soup is our bookseller for our events, and I know that James was just there either today or yesterday to sign some books. So you can actually get a signed copy. You can also pick up Skylar's book and Jiaqing's book. Jiaqing, I'm so sorry. I knew I was going to screw that up eventually. And, you know, if you can't get into Book Soup, support your local brick and mortar. Just make sure that we're reading these stories. You know, I feel like the only way I know anything about the world is from reading books. I actually was able to meet Jackie Collins at a book group once. And I told her that the only reason I know anything about sex is from reading Jackie Collins books. And she said, honey, I'm so sorry. It was really it was an excellent experience for me. That happened. All right. So again, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Jiaqing is going to close out with a song. Wait. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Skylar!
Yes!
Thank you.
I hope you're going to do something fun.
I will
That's
do
what we
some.
need to figure out next, is to like how to transport the cake to your house. Yeah.
Catch.
Thanks.
James is baking stuff all the time. I'm just like, I know where you live too. So you hear me knocking, you know who it is.
All
right.
I'll have something for you.
Awesome. So actually, before I do the closeout, is there any burning desire? Does anybody want to say something, you know, to close out? Like, did we miss anything?
Oh, I'm really excited about both of your books. I'm definitely going to go and find them when I get off this call.
Right, I will send you mine signed, okay? Don't even worry about it.
Yay.
Just send me a...
Yes, me too. Me too.
Amazing. Amazing.
Okay.
I love it. All right. Okay, so WeHo Reads is a celebrated literary series presenting new and noteworthy authors of interest to the West Hollywood community. WeHo Reads is presented by the City of West Hollywood's Arts Division. And I just want to say that Dara and I have had such a great time producing the series this year. You can watch all of the events here on the WeHo Arts YouTube channel until the end of the year at least. Hopefully it'll be longer than that. That said, we have one event left. We're very excited about it. Please join us for our culminating event in June. And I believe I just brain farted on June what? Is it June 16th? Dare, tell me. I don't know. Drop the event into the chat so that we know when it is. It's called Legacy. Yes, he said in all caps. It's called Legacy, Lineage, and the Last Generation. I'm like, we're so excited. I have no idea what day it is. We'll be featuring poets Juby, Ariola Headley, Rajiv Mohabir, and our very own Dare Williams, accompanied by musical guest Jason Joseph of Elephants with Guns. Please RSVP, please tell your friends. You know, this is our Pride event. This is the last one in the series. We're so excited about it. And again, so thank you so much for coming. Thank you, James, Skylar, Jiaqing. And Jiaqing's going to close us out with another amazing song. And maybe we'll all wave before. Maybe we should all wave now just in case we screw up the tech. Yeah. And then if we don't wave at the end, then you'll know that we waved, right? Yeah, I just like to cover my bases. I'm not a YouTube star. You know what I'm saying? All right, girl, take it away.
Okay. you're sleeping well. When you wake up, if you wake up, you wake up with yourself. And no matter what you read that day, and no matter what you ate, when you wake up, if you wake up, you wake up with yourself. And when you cry, I want to tell you. Whoa. And when you cry, I want to tell you that when you cry, I want to tell you the veins on the leaves look like the branches they're in, and the branches like roots are your lungs from within. Wind cracking trees against the grains of sand, moved by the water, wind and grass over land. Storm clouds and eddies and orbits in motion. Is this happening? 6 and 28 are the sum of their positive divisors, either divided by 2 or excluding themselves. Have such a good night, everyone.
Let's see if I can bring everybody